Good evening, everyone, and thank you for taking the time out to view my older adult oral video presentation. My name is Tom Kobaugh, and my interviewee was who we will call, for the purpose of this video, Mr. P. Now, who is Mr. P? Mr. P is a retired airman, and he was in the Air Force for over 20 years, and also he was a mail delivery person for over 20 years in a small town not too far from where I actually grew up. He's also a volunteer in his community. He volunteers at a local homeless shelter as well as a part of the choir in his church. He's a devout Catholic. He was baptized and he was confirmed in the Catholicism at a young age, and still practices religion to this day. Also, one of Mr. P's, one of the things he wanted me to bring up was before he finished high school, he was selected for an 18-month course to be a computer programmer with IBM, and that was back in 1968, and that was working with what he called a dinosaur of a computer known as the IBM 360. He was the only one in his high school to be selected for this program. However, he did decide to pursue a career in the Air Force rather than go forward with this for reasons we will get to later. The final thing I want to bring up is he had a shaky relationship with his father, which also we will dive into more detail about that here shortly. Now, why I chose Mr. P. Mr. P is one of, if not the most positive people I have ever met. He is the father of a mutual friend of mine and my wife's. He is our mutual friend's father, and I've met him maybe a handful of times. I can count on one hand, and every time I see him, he's smiling, and he's just always saying, "I hope you have a good day, bless you." Very charismatic and positive person, and he shares a lot of the same philosophies as I do. He wants to promote goodness and sincerity in a world that it doesn't have a lot of that anymore. And I would like to not only live the same positive lifestyle as he does, but I'd like to promote it as well. The idea of giving back to society, the idea of it's okay what you went through, you are no longer a victim, you are a fighter, you are a warrior because of it. So Mr. P is a person I can respect and I wanted to understand more, so that's why I chose him for this. Mr. P is 66 years old. The developmental stage I chose for this is integrity versus despair, stage 8 of Erikson's stages. Now, to loosely define both, integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is looking. That is a core value that was taught to me in the military. The 3 core values of the United States Marine Corps was honor, integrity, and commitment. And despair is a feeling of hopelessness. Now, Mr. P, he is at a very reflective time in his life, and I chose him because he told me that he may not have made the best decisions growing up, from whenever he was a young lad all the way until raising his own children and his own family and making his own career moves. He may not have made the best decision growing up, however, he made the best decision he felt at the time, and he doesn't like to dwell on his past. He doesn't want to regret the decisions he went with. So I think that's a great ideal for us all to follow. All in all, Mr. P shows how much a positive mental attitude can carry and how paying it forward is a good motto to live by. Challenges that Mr. P had growing up. Again, I mentioned this earlier. An uneasy relationship with his father. He went on to tell me that his father was a very bitter and angry person because of many abusive things that happened to Mr. P's father as a child, that Mr. P's father carried on to with Mr. P and his siblings. Multiple siblings. Mr. P went on to tell me that he had 7 sisters and 2 brothers, so he is the third of 10 children. And he joked to say that whenever he was growing up, he would tell his younger siblings, I was okay with 3, but the more of you that come by, the more there is to provide for. And he, like he said, he doesn't regret saying that. However, it is a sore subject at family gatherings when that gets brought up. Another challenge is his military career. Although it is honorable, it is also stressful with the family. Mr. P himself is married, and we'll go into more of that in detail later on. He is married. He has been married with 2 daughters, and his job, he could not get into great detail about what he did because it is highly classified. However, with that amount of classification, with that amount of responsibility in a military place, it also comes with a lot of stress. I not only know that from experience, but I've known that for a while. His accomplishments. I talked earlier about how he was selected to be a computer programmer in 1964 out of high school. However, he decided to go into the U.S. Air Force instead and did that for over 20 years until he retired. He also retired a second time from the United States Postal Service. He was a mail delivery person in a small town where he didn't want to just deliver mail to people. He also wanted to go an extra mile on that. World travel, not only in his military career, but even today, he and his wife like to travel a lot, so he gets to see a lot of different cultures and a lot of different things that a lot of people cannot, and that makes him grow as an individual. He also has 2 children, and within the last year, he celebrated the birth of his first grandchild, a little girl. He's a volunteer in this community, and as I mentioned before, a devout Catholic. Going back to the father was abusive, he went on to tell me how Mr. P would go on to tell me that his father would like to spend more time and money working and at the fire hall, which was kind of like a tavern at the time, than at home, and wouldn't provide much. He would go on to tell me that the way that the economics of the house worked out is he would get paid his job. Mr. P would get paid from his one job, and then his father would get paid from the other week by week. So everyone had a paycheck in the house every week, and Mr. P's father would buy the bare minimum to feed the family for the week, and then spend the rest of it on alcohol. Whereas whenever Mr. P worked at high school at I believe it was a printing press, a printing company, he would ensure that his siblings had everything they needed. before he spent any money on himself. Mr. P went on to discuss how he saw his mother begging his father for food and for money for food, money for clothing, and Mr. P would not only just degrade his mother but degrade the children and demean them, and it caused a lot of grief growing up. As I said, he was raised Catholic. He was the only one out of his 10 brothers and sisters to go from 1st grade to 12th grade in a Catholic school. And his mother and his grandmother both believed he would be a priest or a lawyer growing up, but they had the idea that they wanted him to be a priest, and they had the idea that he was going to be a priest. He had many additional supports growing up as well. Mr. P's father worked as a railroad worker, and many times Mr. P and his siblings would cross state lines unescorted to visit family out of state. And lastly, I would like to mention it for this video that Mr. P doesn't see his mistakes in his past as failures. He discusses how he doesn't believe he's made any great failures. He takes what he's done wrong and learns from them, and I believe that's a great way to bring about lessons in life. And I will continue this in the next video, and thanks for hanging with me so far.